Hey there, get ready for a deep dive into the world of Thales of Miletus. You might not recognize the name, but stick with us because this guy was doing incredible stuff way back in 600 BC.
Thales is one of those people whose influence you can really feel even centuries later, even with limited resources. He had some really insightful thoughts.
Yeah, we're talking early philosophy, groundbreaking math, even some engineering genius.
It's amazing.
All this from one person.
It really is.
So to set the scene, Thales lived in Miletus, a bustling port city on the coast of modern-day Turkey. It was a real melting pot of cultures and ideas.
It was a really interesting time, a time of big intellectual change, moving away from explaining the world just through myths and stories about gods and goddesses.
You're saying people were starting to look for answers beyond Zeus did it.
Exactly, and Thales was a leader in this shift. He's actually considered the first philosopher in the Greek tradition because he looked for natural explanations for things happening in nature. He didn't just accept the stories everyone had always told, he wanted to understand the why behind the world around him.
And that's where his famous all is water idea comes in, right?
Yeah.
I have to admit, that's always seemed a bit simple to me.
Yeah, at first glance it seems that way, but it actually reflects a much deeper philosophical concept. Think about it. Thales was searching for a single unifying principle in nature, a fundamental substance that everything else comes from, and for him that was water. And we might not agree with that today, but the act of asking that question, trying to find that common thread, that's what was revolutionary.
So it's not that he literally thought everything was just water, but more that water was the most fundamental element.
Exactly. Aristotle, who wrote centuries later, suggested that Thales might have seen how essential water is for all life. Everything living needs water to survive. Even heat, which is also essential for life, seemed to come from moisture in Thales' time. Remember, this is a world where people cooked over fire and boiled water to make their foods safe.
And let's not forget, Thales lived in a port city surrounded by the Aegean and seawater. Would have been a constant presence in his life.
Absolutely. Now, we can't ignore that his conclusion about water being that fundamental substance was wrong, but what's important is that he was asking the right questions. His search for those underlying principles in nature set the stage for centuries of scientific and philosophical inquiry, and honestly, it's a quest that's still going on today.
It's like he provided that initial spark, that push to look beyond just the surface and search for deeper truths about the universe. But his genius didn't stop at philosophy. This is where things get really interesting for me. Thales was also a brilliant mathematician, right?
He's often credited with bringing geometry from Egypt to Greece and making it more rigorous.
Okay, hold on. I need a little background here. What was so special about Greek geometry? Wasn't it just measuring shapes and angles?
Yeah, it was about shapes and angles, but the Greeks, and especially Thales, they took it a step further. They went beyond the practical stuff and started exploring the underlying principles and relationships within geometry. So instead of just accepting that something was true, they wanted to prove it through logic, and that's where Thales really stands out. He's believed to be the first person to use deductive reasoning to develop geometric proofs, which is the foundation for how we understand geometry even today.
Wow. Deductive reasoning. It sounds so formal. What does that even mean in practice?
Think of it like building an argument, but with logic. You start with established facts and principles and then use logical steps to reach a new conclusion. And this process, which Thales pioneered, is the foundation of mathematical proof. He didn't just see patterns and shapes, he explained why those patterns existed in a clear and consistent way that others could replicate.
Exactly, and one of the things he's most famous for is something we still learn in school, Thales' theorem.
Okay, now that one rings a bell, but I'd be lying if I said I remembered all the details. Could you remind me? Of course, Thales' theorem says that if you have a triangle inside a circle, and one side of the triangle is the diameter of the circle, the angle opposite that diameter is always a right angle, so a 90-degree angle.
Wait, so no matter where that triangle is in the circle, as long as one side is the diameter, the opposite angle is always 90 degrees.
It seems kind of obvious now, but Thales was the one who figured out why it's true, and he proved it mathematically. And that theorem became super important to geometry. It's been used in so many ways throughout history.
It really makes you wonder what other things he might have figured out, things we've just lost to time because, papyrus doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
But getting back to Thales as this kind of early scientist, it wasn't all just theory with him, right? He could actually apply his knowledge to solve real-world problems.
Totally. And the story of how he diverted the Halys River is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. It's a great story. This army is stopped by this river. They can't cross it.
And it had been a big strategic obstacle for a long time.
Right, and then Thales comes in with his understanding of engineering and water and finds a way to redirect the river so the army could cross. How did he do that? Did he just grab a shovel and start digging?
I wish it was that simple. And fortunately, we don't know the exact details. We just have these accounts that say he diverted the river somehow.
Hmm.
Some scholars think he might have built a bunch of canals or a dam to make the water go somewhere else for a while. Whatever he did, it shows how he could take his theoretical understanding of water and use it to solve a real problem.
Resourceful and genius. That's our
Yeah.
Thales. It's one thing to understand geometry on paper. It's a whole other thing to use that knowledge to redirect a river.
Yeah.
But hold on. He was also fascinated by space, right? What kind of stuff did he figure out about the night sky?
Well, Thales made some important contributions to astronomy, even though some of his ideas we now know weren't quite right.
Hey, everybody's got to start somewhere, right?
For sure, it was all about asking those first questions and making those first observations. He's credited with things like observing and recording the solstices and equinoxes, which help people track the seasons more accurately.
Okay, yeah, that's super important if you need to know when to plant your crops.
Right.
What about his other ideas about the stars and planets? What did he think was going on up there?
Well, one idea that might sound a little weird to us now is that he believed the Earth was flat, like a disk floating on water.
A flat Earth. Didn't they have boats back then? You'd think they would have noticed the Earth curving, wouldn't they?
You'd think so, but this was before people traveled very far. Their world was basically what they could see around them. Plus, his data was limited. His flat Earth model wasn't because he didn't know any better. It was his attempt to explain things with what he knew at the time.
Makes sense.
Yeah?
I guess it's all about perspective. But at least he got the water part right. I mean, we are like 70% water, so he was onto something there.
But wait, didn't you say he also figured out something about a solar eclipse? Oh, that's right. That story's too good not to tell Herodotus. The Greek historian he wrote about how Thales supposedly predicted a solar eclipse that happened during a battle between the Lydians and the Medes.
Wait, he predicted a solar eclipse. How was that even possible way back then? Did he have like ancient eclipse glasses or something?
No eclipse glasses, unfortunately, but predicting a solar eclipse back then was different from how we do it now. They didn't have our precise mathematical models and instruments.
So how did he do it? Was it just a lucky guess?
It probably wasn't just a guess. He must have had a pretty good understanding of the cycles of the sun and moon to even get close.
Wow, that's incredible. So even if he couldn't say exactly when it was going to happen, just knowing that an eclipse was possible, that the sun could just disappear for a little while, must have seemed like magic.
Yeah, you can imagine how that would look on a battlefield. According to Herodotus, the eclipse freaked people out so much that they actually stopped fighting. It just goes to show the power of understanding nature. Even back then, knowledge was power.
Talk about a mic drop, am I right? Hey, gods, you want to call a timeout? I can make the sun disappear? But even if we don't know all the details of that story, it really shows how amazing Thales was at looking at the natural world and understanding it.
And that's not even all he did. He didn't just try these different things. He was good at all of them. Philosophy, math, astronomy, engineering, Thales really was a polymath, someone who wants to learn about everything.
A true Renaissance man, like you said, way before the Renaissance. It makes you wonder what he could have done with all the stuff we have today. Imagine giving Thales a super powerful telescope or one of those supercomputers. What mysteries would he be trying to figure out?
Right. I mean, knowing him and how curious he was, he would probably be looking into the biggest mysteries in science today. Maybe he'd be trying to figure out dark matter and dark energy, those mysterious forces that control the universe.
Or maybe he would have gone all in on trying to understand the human brain, using his philosophical mind to shed light on things like consciousness, artificial intelligence, maybe even the very nature of reality.
It's mind-blowing to think about how his ideas from so long ago could still be important to these cutting-edge areas. But I think the most inspiring thing about Thales isn't the specific discoveries he made, but how he approached understanding the world. He reminds us that true knowledge doesn't mean just blindly believing what other people tell us. It comes from asking questions, observing, and finding our own answers.
It's that spirit of inquiry that really drives progress no matter what you're doing, whether you're trying to understand the universe or just trying to figure out the best way to, organize your day. Speaking of which, I kind of want to go look at the stars now.
You should. It's humbling, It reminds us how vast the universe is and how powerful curiosity is. Just like Thales, we should never lose our sense of wonder.
Well said. So there you have it, our deep dive into the world of Thales of Miletus. Hopefully this got you thinking and maybe even inspired you to see the world with a little bit of that Thalesian curiosity. Remember that next big breakthrough might be just a question away.